The stewardess took off her stockings in front of the passengers. It turns out that the plane's landing gear is malfunctioning and has to make an emergency landing. If a fire breaks out during the landing, the nylon stockings will easily stick to the skin and cause extensive burns. At this point, the plane can't still fly for 20 minutes. In order to minimize the risk of fire during the emergency landing, firefighters on the ground sprayed foam on the runway where the plane landed. The foam needs to cover the length of the runway up to a kilometer. All the city's foam trucks are mobilized. Flight attendants have to minimize the damage to passengers. All earrings, necklaces, and watches are to be removed from the passengers. Even shoes have to be removed. All passengers are concentrated in the back of the plane. The most dangerous place to land is the cockpit of the plane. In order to protect the young pilot, the captain ordered young pilot to go to the back of the plane. The chief steward has also given the last orders to all the cabin crew. The plane will land on the runway in 6 minutes. All firefighters on the runway must be evacuated in 5 minutes. A news van has run off the runway and crashed into other vehicles. Firefighters have been called in to rescue those trapped in the car. The mechanic opened the plane's hatch. The plane's front landing gear won't go down. The mechanic is going outside to find out why. He carefully reached the front landing gear of the airplane. Although the plane had been lowered to its lowest altitude, it was still 500 meters from the ground. The mechanic's hand slipped. The only lighting device fell. The command center on the ground is also waiting for the results of the mechanic's inspection. The mechanic is hitting the landing gear with an axe. As long as the landing gear can't be lowered, the plane will land safely. The mechanic quickly found the cause. The landing gear struts had broken, and the landing gear couldn't be lowered. The command center on the ground had to order an emergency landing. However, this is the first time they've encountered such an emergency situation. There's no successful experience abroad. If the nose of the plane hits the ground first, none of the crew would have survived. If the plane runs off the runway, will cause more casualties. If we choose to land on the grass, because of the huge friction between the plane and the ground, it would cause an explosion. The Aviation Administration finally decided to let the plane land on the runway. To minimize the damage, the Ground Command Center began to prepare for the forced landing of the plane. Just as everyone was evacuating that airstrip, two out-of-control cars crashed into each other. There were only 5 minutes left before the plane was forced to land. Firefighters used cutters to slice through the cars. The people trapped in the cars were rescued. The cabin lights went out. The plane prepares to land. The captain is already sweating with nervousness. The car on the runway is pushed out at the last minute. The rear landing gear of the airplane landed first. The captain controlled the plane's landing attitude very well, trying to keep the nose touching the ground as late as possible, minimizing the risk of a fire. There were still a lot of sparks coming out of the ground. Everyone is very nervous. If it catches fire, it could cause an explosion. The flight attendants kept shouting to the passengers to keep everyone in good condition to resist the impact. All the fire trucks are moving. Foam on the runway was vital. The plane never caught fire. After a long taxi, the plane came to a stop, but the plane was still in danger of catching fire. All the fire trucks started to cool down the plane. Finally, the crew organized the evacuation of passengers from the plane. 180 passengers were safely evacuated from the plane, the first airplane in the world to make a successful forced landing without a single casualty.